As a jazz guitarist and teacher, then let me help you avoid a few things that a lot of jazz beginners get wrong and waste a lot of time on. You might actually be making one of them right now. And there are certainly a few mistakes that I made myself as well, but I'll tell you about that along the way. Jazz is complicated, and I know it can be fun to learn music theory and read about all the different options and things to study that you have available in books or online lessons, but that's a very superficial way to learn things. And with theory, you should really aim to learn the other way around. Now, what does that mean? That means that you're better off learning songs and solos and then using those to recognize theory in the music that you already know. That's 100 times stronger and a lot more efficient. If you have a song with a Lydian dominant or a 4 minor chord, then you immediately know what that sounds like. But if you just read about it, then it's just some abstract concept. Another problem similar to this that I ran into was that I had lessons in theory which covered way too much without any real connection with music. And finally, when it was connected to music, I was told that everyone in jazz played rhythm changes wrong. Just start with the music and then learn theory later. Here's an easy one, which I luckily don't see that often. But if you think you might want to play jazz, then don't start with getting a jazz guitar. Most of the time, people can't tell what guitar you're playing, and you can easily start with whatever you already have. I actually did the first 4 years of playing jazz and getting into the conservatory on my SRE Strat, even if I did put flat wound 13s on it. And I didn't get my first real jazz guitar until I was 1 year into that education. Don't pretend to like jazz just because you think it makes you look sophisticated and advanced. Now, there's probably a good and a bad way to go about this. If you play another style of music and you want to explore jazz to get some new influences, then that's of course fine. But watch out that you don't sign up for a year of jazz classes with music that you can't stand listening to.
Hello, and welcome to Jazz Club.
And if you don't like jazz, then there are lots of other styles that you can check out. And you will probably get more inspired and learn more if you're checking out stuff that you actually like. The next one is unfortunately way too common. Here's how you should never do it. Decide to learn a song, but you don't learn the melody or learn to play the chords. Instead, you go straight to iReal and try to solo over the chord changes. This is a very typical beginner mistake, and it is the best way to never learn any songs and get very frustrated with your own mistakes and losing the forms all the time because you don't hear the melody in the back of your mind. And I'm certainly speaking from experience here. The first jazz standard I tried to learn was Green Dolphin Street, and for a few weeks I was getting absolutely nowhere using an Aebersold backing track. In hindsight, it's obvious that since I never listened to a recording of it, didn't know the melody or understand the chords, then that was bound to fail, which I also did gloriously. And that's of course because I didn't know any better. I have a video where I tell that story, I'll link to it in the description. Chord melody is kind of tricky. You probably don't want to start with it. In fact, maybe you don't want to start by learning chords at all, because if you zoom out a bit, I'm sure you know that melody is more important than harmony. But in any case, it's probably not useful to start learning jazz by trying to learn somebody else's arrangement of a song, which is way too complicated for you to hear, to understand, or to play, especially if you can't make your way through a medium swing blues in B-flat. Playing a solo chord melody requires you to use the skills with feel and timing that you get from playing that B-flat blues. And technically, chord melody arrangements are often very difficult, and you don't really improve your phrasing and feel by trying to remember chords or really like straining your hands. You learn that somewhere else, and rhythm and feel are kind of important things in jazz. Joe Pass didn't start by learning something as difficult as one of his own chord melody versions of Virtuoso. He started with some songs and some soloing. Since I now mentioned B-flat blues, don't forget about the blues. Jazz can become too academic and technical. It's not all about scales and extensions, and there are things that sound amazing and don't fit 100% in the boxes and categories that we think of as harmony and music theory. Blues is probably the most important one of those. You can play blues with conviction on pretty much anything, and because it's blues, then it sounds fine even though it clashes with chords left and right. Using blues and checking out blues will help you have more sounds in your playing so that you're not always sounding like a machine interpreting the harmony. So it will help you have more variation in your playing. I've certainly had periods of only focusing on spelling out the harmony, and usually checking out solos and listening to great jazz artists is what was pulling me out of that. They always have that connection in there, and that should tell you something. Another mistake that especially beginners make is chord books. Now I get that it's fun to play chords and it's nice to have a book where you have all these diagrams, but If you're just looking at a book with some diagrams without also trying to put them to use, then you're not going to get anywhere. Learning empty information without also learning how to put it to use in music is very inefficient. And this may be a hot take, but I have to admit that I actually kind of think that even some of the Ted Green books fall into this category. If you want to study that, then that's fine, but make sure to also check out some songs, know them by heart, so that you can put that stuff to use, because otherwise you're not going anywhere with it. I was hinting at this in the beginning, and it is also a little bit ironic, but if you're trying to learn jazz and you're only spending time looking at YouTube videos and online lessons without actually practicing, you're probably not gonna get very far, even if they're my videos. You need to also sit down and practice stuff, make music, make it into something. Now, if you want some help with that and a longer learning path that you can follow, then check out my course and join the community to get some feedback and the chance to learn together with others. A kind of painful lesson that I had when I was just getting started playing jazz was at a time when I was playing something in the lesson. I don't remember what it was. It was probably just playing a song with my teacher. He stopped me and asked me if I owned a metronome. When I said yes, he said, well, why don't you use it? And you also don't have perfect time. So use a metronome and don't use backing tracks all the time. Make sure that you feel the time, that you can groove, and that you can hear the harmony. Don't lean on recordings or an app too much. That's why everyone is always telling you to use a metronome. Some of the grooviest people I know, like Charlie Hunter, are always practicing with a metronome. That really should tell you something. Many of us get interested in jazz because we come across beautiful chords with lots of extensions and colors, but don't only focus on learning difficult chords with a lot of extensions. They are much more difficult to use. And I guess that's also why Barry Harris is often talking about not liking big chords. Instead, focus on simple chords that you can play songs with and turn into music. So we're talking shell voicings, drop 2, drop 3, just basic stuff. Don't think so much about Alan Holdsworth, and think a little bit more about Freddie Green. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Holdsworth. He's actually a favorite of mine, but not the place you start if you want to have voicings for All of Me for your new jazz combo. When it comes to soloing, then maybe this is the equivalent of the chord books. At least it's very similar. First insisting on learning scales and arpeggios and all the other technical things before you learn any music. And that's not going to be useful. You also want to get started with the music, and you don't need to know everything in all positions and all keys before you start learning songs. Probably nobody really did anyway. Don't forget that jazz is a language and you need to learn to speak it, which means that you want to play with the right type of vocabulary and the right phrasing. And one of the easiest ways to learn that is to learn solos by ear and then play along with them to really get that into your system. But it can be difficult to learn solos by ear, and you want to make sure that you're not taking something that's too difficult, because then you just end up giving up in the middle and getting frustrated. Now, if you want some suggestions for very easy solos, but also great material to start with, then check out this video where I go over some easy solos by amazing jazz guitarists. In fact, probably stuff that you anyway want to learn. Check it out.